So let's get started then. Welcome everyone to this workshop at the APR IGF. We are going to have an hour to talk about learn from home during COVID-19. I think this is a topic that is has been kind of a big topic for quite some time this year. In fact, the whole of this year was the only big topic everywhere. What has been interesting is that as we when COVID kind of broke out, a lot of the schools, of course, have to kind of lock down, and students were confined at home. And then we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how remote working would actually work. And over the last part of last school year, so generally from February or March to June or July, I see that, we see that different schools around the world trying to adapt to a new normal, if you will, and experimenting a lot of ad hoc work. And then over the summer, regrouped, and when September came along and a new school year came in, different schools have different strategies that they learn from the ad hoc work, and then deployed into kind of full production, if you will, as school restarted. And that experience, I think, is very useful for the internet governance community, and not only from the learning from the ad hoc reactionary process, and then a little bit more planned. And then I think hopefully as the panelists go through their discussion, towards the end, one of the biggest questions that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of people are interested in, would be what's going to be the future? What does the future look like with the experience from COVID-19? How is education going to change in view of this? And I just think about one particular point that my 5-year-old kid was going through a transition from kindergarten to grade 1 this year, and it was hugely disruptive for him. But one thing that I found really interesting is that I don't know, the infrastructure, it's held up pretty well, but one thing I found really troubling is as I signed up a Zoom account, or as I signed up a Google account for my kid, I have to, in front of him, lie because his age will not allow him to sign up. Right? I mean, what are we teaching our kids? It's like, oops, what should I say? These are some of the challenges that are unforeseen in some cases, and these are the challenges that will continue to come. And hopefully, in this panel, and I welcome next slide, please. We have 5 of us here. Next slide, please. Myself and myself and Albert Wong from Hong Kong, from the Association of IT Leaders in Education. He's also a school teacher, and will be able to tell us a lot about the experience there. Aris Ignacio, he's the Dean of the College of Information Technology at Southville International School and colleges in Philippines. Don Junio Rodney, he's a senior research assistant with the UNU-CS in Macau, and works on projects related to technology policy. And then Rilla, Gusela, who's actually one of our NetMission.Asia program ambassadors, and is currently working on projects related to learning management systems in Jakarta. So welcome everyone, and I will, without further ado, pass the floor to Albert. Albert will share his screen with us.
Okay, thank you, Edmon. I'm waiting for the rights to do the share. Okay, I can have the rights. Okay, so good afternoon, should be here. Here's afternoon, right? So afternoon, everybody. Here's Albert Wong from Hong Kong. Today, my sharing topic is mainly about our experience we learned from the COVID-19. So my focus is on the first is about the school practices and the readiness for online lesson during the class suspension, And the second one is enlightenment from experience that we learned during the online lesson. Okay, in fact, my background, I'm a computer subject teacher, but in fact, I'm a biology graduate, okay, of a local secondary school in Hong Kong, and also taking care of the school IT. Another role for me is the chairman of association, which is called Association of IT Leaders in Education, which is an association that formed by computer and IT teachers of Hong Kong. Of course, because of the post of a chairman of the ATO, and I'm the IT consultant of different primary and secondary schools in Hong Kong. And that's why today's sharing, I can share some of the experience that I gained from different schools. Okay, a brief description about ATO. We formed about 17 years and with so many IT teachers and also computer teachers from Hong Kong. We are also involved in different EDB, what we call the Education Bureau, Examination Authority, and also different school committees, okay? Maybe luckily or unluckily, the class suspension in Hong Kong due to COVID-19 is not the first time that we have class suspension. In fact, we experienced 5 days class suspension when we are in November last year. It is because of the social instability. Because of some protests, etc. I think most of you have heard from the news. So, in fact, at that period, most of the school, what they did is, because the class suspension, just like the COVID-19, is very sudden. So most of the school is just do some announcement of the self-study work, learning through the learning management system, etc. But in fact, no live lesson at that time. However, when come to February, we know again that the class suspension again, but this time it's because of the COVID-19. We learned a lesson before, and we know that ask students to do their works by themselves is not a good arrangement. So we think that online lessons seems to be a good arrangement, and most of the school start to think about how to make online lesson. But some school using a month or even though 2 months time to do the thinking, okay, student will suffer. So in fact, from February, there are some different schools. They have do some announcement of their teacher and learner arrangement. For example, this is from Hong Kong U. In fact, Hong Kong U already announced their online lesson, okay, starting from the mid-February, and they already expected if the COVID-19 lasts for a long time, then even though for the online lesson will also last for a long time. This is a traditional Chinese news, and sorry that I can't find the English one, and so it will appear in Chinese. Even though what we call the Baptist University, some secondary schools, they started to think about online lesson instead of face-to-face lesson, because we all predicted we cannot resume the lesson in a short period of time. But for primary school, we can see that some primary school, they have live lesson in what we call the PM, or even though I know some of them, they have their live lesson in evening, because just like Edmon, okay, we need to have parents besides the kids so that they can have online lessons, okay. Some secondary schools, they have the online lesson, another timetable for the online lesson, but in fact, there are some problems, and I will share afterward. In fact, we face there are some problems of the online lesson, or even though the e-learning during the class suspension period. We are talking about we select pre-record or we make a live lesson, about the timetable, which is a centralized one, how many versions we have, or whether it is a hybrid period. What I call a hybrid period is just like what we have now. Now in Hong Kong, half of the school students can come back to the school for face-to-face lesson, but half of them need to be still online. And also about the platform that we selected, and also the student involvement. I don't know whether you know what is AFK, but it is very famous in Hong Kong e-learning. It is talking about away from keyboard, because during the online learning, most of the students are present, but in fact they are AFK. Okay, so we need to check for their attendance and check for their participation, and also SEN, the special education need, and also about some practical works. So in Hong Kong, we're talking about the using pre-recorded or live. It depends on the year level, whether in junior primary or you're in senior secondary. Okay. About the timetable, you can see here is one of the example. In fact, the school using the normal timetable, but because for online lesson, we don't expect students to have the online lesson from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock at the very beginning. So we just selected some of the lessons for them. For example, for each week, okay, each subject has 1 lesson or 2 lessons, okay, for the online lesson, so that at least the student can will not lose all the things, okay. And about the version, I can see some of the school making 4 different versions of timetable. But however, in fact, it is a problem because students are very hard to follow. Okay, about the platform for Hong Kong, in fact, we are using majorly for these 4 different platforms. Of course, Zoom, most school is using Zoom, but however, because of the security issues that it raised before, some school has changed to use other platform. And also about the student involvement, how we check the student are AFK. In fact, what we can do is using polling or using chat, so that if we find the student do not do the polling, we can assume that they are what we call virtually attending the lesson, but not physically attending the lesson, okay? In fact, we have some other solution, like using flip grip, using peer tech, etc. But in fact, it is for high-level users. My final part is about the enlightenment from the experience during the online lesson. Because of the COVID-19, most of the school having their times for online lesson actually is less than their actual face-to-face lesson. And even though right now, the Hong Kong Education Bureau order the school cannot have a full day lesson, they must have half day lesson. That means that we can only teach with selected content. So we start to think about it, why we need to teach whole day. Okay, in the past, why we need to teach whole day? If we teach half day, we can still teach students all the things we want. Why we need to have a whole day lesson? Can we spare the time in the afternoon for students to do personalized learning, what we call the extracurricular activities, or even do some career-oriented training? So these are the sharing that I have about my experience during the COVID-19. So I pass the time back to Edmon. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. That's that last part that I'll definitely come back to you, because that's very, very interesting, is looking towards into the future. But before that, we'll go to Dawn from United Nations University from Macau. What's the experience there? Dawn, you're still muted.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, I was just telling Jenna that I moved to Manila 2 days ago. So I was in a quarantine hotel up to this morning. So now I'm already home, finishing the rest of my quarantine. I'm transitioning to a new role in Jakarta by end of the month, but I'll still be part of the UN family moving forward. So anyway, a brief background about me. So I'm more or less doing research in the field of technology for sustainable development. That's the focus of our institute in Macau. And one of the things that we are particularly interested in is in the area of ICT and education. We don't do teaching at UNU. We mainly do policy and advisory service to other UN member states or other UN agencies, funds, and programs related to technology and sustainable development. So perhaps this afternoon, I'll be talking more about broad policy issues related to ICT and education in light of COVID-19. On a more personal note, perhaps I'll also be talking about my experience on the flip side of learning in the times of COVID-19, and that is, what educators and what academics do aside from teaching, which is doing research. Because we do a lot of research in our institute, we also have to adjust some of the ways we do research, how we generate knowledge in light of COVID-19. So I'll talk about that as well towards the end of my talk. Broadly speaking, I think Edmond and Albert provided us with the good foreground on the issues that we confront in light of COVID-19, and that is mainly disruption brought about by school closures, movement restrictions, and quarantine. And if you go to the website of UNESCO, for example, and they were tracking how many learners were affected by COVID-19, by school closures, at its peak in April, it was estimated that there were about 1.5 billion learners who were affected by COVID-19. That represents about 90% of students worldwide in 190 countries across the world. The most recent data, according to the tracker of UNESCO, there's about 851 million learners affected by COVID-19, meaning they're not able to go to school and take classes in a traditional way. And this affects about 48.7 percent of enrolled learners worldwide. And there are about, as of yesterday, 43 countrywide closures. So across the world, there are about 43 countries where schools are totally closed and children have to either learn remotely, do blended learning, or other types of learning approaches in light of movement and quarantine restrictions. One of the things that we found out in our study about how COVID-19 is affecting learners and education in general is what we see is that when schools transition to a more online approach, existing inequalities about digital access, and perhaps this is what we've been discussing in the previous days in this conference and in other related issues, that we see that the physical, institutional, and social infrastructure that supports effective engagement in technology-enabled solutions. These are not adequate in many countries. It could, because of various limitations, there's an issue of access to the devices itself. There's an issue of learners and teachers themselves not equipped with the right tools to transition to these new type of learning, and the whole overall social infrastructure that supports an effective learning through technology-mediated channels. These things were not present. I think perhaps Aris will talk about this later. Early this year, Internet Society Philippines, in fact, wrote a piece about how different universities in Metro Manila, the challenges that they face in moving from face-to-face learning to synchronous or asynchronous learning methodology. And those has certain implications when you look at countries who are already challenged with when it comes to the physical infrastructure needed to have effective ICT mediated learning experience. Even in countries that are more advanced, so in Macau, for example, when you were talking to some of the teachers there about how they do online learning, one of the teachers shared to us that she was a bit ashamed or a bit she was a bit ashamed when she asked the students to turn on their camera, everyone, so that she can see them. On a normal circumstances, this is shouldn't be very it shouldn't be very controversial. But then when one of the students turned on her camera, she was in a very, very small space because, in fact, Macau, as you know, is a highly dense population, and in his household there are three other school-going children, all in a very small space, trying to fit and use the computers and the bandwidth, sharing the same space. So when she turned on the computer, the kid was a bit saying, I apologize for the messy and the very cramped space, because that's the only space that she got in order for her to attend this class. So the teacher thought, is it fair for me to ask students to turn on their camera in that regard, when in fact these kinds of inequalities, you would say, would become more apparent even in a society such as Macau, which has one of the highest internet penetration rate, and all these access and physical infrastructure issues are not necessarily problematic. And even and if you go to more extreme cases like in the Philippines, and perhaps again Aris can talk about this, you have news reports of students going up a tree just to just to get a good Wi-Fi signal to send their test results. And even then, is it fair for the teacher to put a time limit on when they are able to submit their test results? Because if they are unable to connect to a Wi-Fi signal and they are not able to send the report, they are unduly penalized for not being able to fulfill their requirements, when in fact they were trying. But it's just that the physical and the whole social infrastructure that should support these kinds of types of learning are not yet there. So those are the things that we have to think about when we think about the future of blended learning and online learning. On the things that we do, I'll be wrapping up quickly on the things that we do on a personal scale, on a personal note, I'm a researcher, and at the start of the year, we had a lot of field work lined up to September this year. We were supposed to go to a few countries to collect data, do our KIIs, key informant interviews, conduct focus group discussions. But as soon as all the borders closed, unable to go to Nepal, unable to go to Sri Lanka to do all our field work. And so we have to adjust the way we do things, the way we collect data, and the way we do research in this regard. On our own experience in one of our field work, we had to contract local knowledge experts and trust them that they would be able to implement the protocol that we have in terms of data collection. So these new uncontemplated ways of using technology has to be maximized, and we have to implement protocols online using different platforms like Trello boards to manage deliverables, daily check-ins, which is easy for countries like, say, Philippines, where you have internet access. But if we are talking about field workers in Nepal, in rural Nepal, um, this is not as easy as, telling them let's have a video call in 3 minutes. These have to be scheduled. We have to set a time that this is when we will talk, and that these are the issues that we would need, because there are bandwidth issues. If there's a storm in their field, we won't be able to collect and interact with them in the same way that we want to. And in focus group discussion, we have to transition from face-to-face focus group discussion to an online focus group discussion. And here you lose a lot of uncoded words. You lose a lot of the physical and nonverbal cues that are inherent in a face-to-face focus group discussions. Whether the quality and the kind of data that you collect as a result of the transitions that we are making because of COVID-19, they are of the same level as what we would do before COVID-19. It remains to be seen, but I guess the underlying message for all of us is that we have to adapt, and it's if the previous way was unsustainable, then perhaps moving forward, we should think about the best ways to think about using technology that take into consideration the social, physical, going back again to the social, physical, and institutional infrastructure that supports effective use of technology, whether in online teaching or in conducting fieldwork as a result of COVID-19. I'll end with that, and then perhaps we can discuss this on broader detail moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Don, and very interesting perspective from the research and the protocols to use there. I haven't really thought about that. That's very interesting. Focus groups and stuff, and how we, it's certainly a different kind of situation. So how do you compare the research? That's really interesting. So we'll go down to Rilla and then to Aris. Rilla is, I guess you have the opportunity to be on both sides as a student as well as a researcher. Rilla?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So maybe, okay, my name is Rilla Gusela. I'm from Indonesia, and I represent my organization, Internet Development Institute, or ID Institute, and I come from technical community. Next, okay. So maybe the first two slides is about the people behind the scenes. So when we talk about like online learning and so on, so that's because of my engineer fellow and also me. So thank you very much. That's what I would like to say for the first two slides. Next. So there are so many positions in IT. So as we know that IT is can fix the mobile phone or fix something like that, fix the internet or fix a lot of things. But actually, we have we have a different position. So we cannot do anything actually. Like we have a different skill, different things to do in IT. Next. Yeah, that's the code on online learning and in every meeting. You're on mute, so yeah, now you're on mute. Thanks. Next. Okay. So first of all, why I put the symbol of this the WhatsApp, and then yeah, so actually we know that not all of the regions is lucky to have a good connections, and maybe like the remote areas and so on. So it have a relation with the next slide. Next. Yeah, the digital infrastructure. So yeah, I put some of the interview from my presidents, Indonesian presidents. Yeah, COVID-19 has taught about the internet and networking infrastructures. Like it cannot be denied that to support online learning activities must be supported by the infrastructure, like because software or even other online system or apps will not be accessible if the internet infrastructure is not yet supported. And the surge of in-network traffic number is like has been striking, right? So many telecom providers like ISP and yeah, a lot of kind of network companies say traffic has at least doubled, like as millions of homebound users convene online, and like services such as Zoom, Slack, like Teams, like such of that apps experience record user growth, right? So yeah, the internet backbone is essentially like important for this pandemic. So maybe we can think about the positive impact of this COVID-19, like, oh, so the government can put effort in establishment to, equity of the regions to get the good internet connections. Next. Yeah, that's the main, not the main actually, but the famous learning management system in Indonesia. The first is Zenius Educations. Yeah, it's to help the student in this pandemic, because some of the online learning it's not provide enough. So that's why this platform give like discount or free access. So basically, it's more like a practical tutor, so on. So it's really useful for students, especially like in high school and grade or university students, because the lesson is more complicated than like elementary. That's why this platform give the more practical like tutorial of math, tutorial of science, and so on. Next. Yes, this is what I would like to say as my experience, the best practice of learning management system. The first is actually there's a lot of points, but I put into the first is on demand. Like we identify the objective, because there are some schools that want to make their own LMS because is it to make it easier in management, and also like their demands and they're concerned about data privacy, like especially for elementary school, but not limited to it, because some of them still prefer to use WhatsApp, like to give information or report to parents, and which is we can examine the risks and challenges that schools face in securing their system. But the main point also is what I experience is to support additional subject. Like for example, Indonesia, like we provide the religious sessions or feature before the main lesson. So basically, yeah, almost the school in Indonesia, we held like praying sessions before the school start. And the second is with the global like development of this COVID-19 outbreak, like the psychological issues which accompany this pandemic have rapidly compounded its public health burden, like especially in students. So that's why in Indonesia, usually there are a counseling teacher. So that's why in in LMS, like their demands is also we provide online consultations like that. So I think it's really useful. So that's why we have to listen like their demands. Next. Yeah. The second is user documentation. I know that some of like maybe the capital city teacher is easy to adapt the technologies and so on. But again, in the remote areas and maybe like usually they face-to-face learning sessions, but now it's online. So that's why we have to provide user documentation, and maybe that we can see that the user documentation is the main point, but we can do that inside the LMS. For example, like this feature, we can give the descriptions inside that. So when we hover the function, it will pop up the functions, the function descriptions, and so on. So maybe it's more related to UI or UX experience, but yeah, because the teacher maybe cannot remember all of them once practice. So that's why we have to provide it, and it's really useful for for the engineer also, because for example, like for updates, for handovers or maintenance and more. That's
Rilla, just a check on time. Just try to wrap up soon.
Next. Yeah, that's the last. This is the improvement in technology, technical community. So actually, because of the demands of ICT now, it's higher and higher. So we have to improve the technical community. For example, like in Indonesia, the Ministry of Information, Communication, and Technology provide the scholarship, and they have a partnership with official IT platforms such as Oracle, Cisco, Android, Google, and so on. And also, we can see that the Udemy, Coursera, and Allison, it's the sum of the, maybe you already knew this. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughts on how we could improve this. And I see a very lively discussion on the chat, talking about devices and the difficulty of kids actually getting their hands on the devices. But I actually find it the other way around. I find it very difficult to get the device out of my 5-year-old kids' hands. Now just a year ago we talked about screen time limitation, but now they're on the screen from 8:30 in the morning until 1 p.m. So, but with that, I'll go to Aris, and I'm sorry we're sort of running out of time, so if you can keep this short. But others, please continue to speak over the chat, and if you have anything to share, you can put your hand up at any time, or put your question in the chat room. We'll come back and try to make this a little bit more interactive. Aris, to you first.
Okay, thank you, Edmon. What is great about going last is that a lot of the things have already been discussed. So that's great for me. But anyway, as Don mentioned, we at the Internet Society Philippines chapter were able to conduct a short survey of all schools with regards to, not really all schools, but a couple of schools with regards to how they responded with the pandemic that happened around maybe March of this year. So next slide, please. Next 2 slides. Okay, so with regards to that, there are certain approaches that we found out with regards to some of the schools who have continued going into the online-based classes, because some of which have suspended their respective classes and just waiting to the point that we could go on face-to-face. But here are some of the approaches that they have done. First, one is asynchronous online learning. Another one is synchronous online learning. And the third and last one is mostly the combination of the synchronous and synchronous online learning. Next slide, please. These are some of the the examples of how, for example, lectures were being done in a synchronous mode and an asynchronous type of learning, and so on and so forth. But we're going to go into that by, next slide, please. By what are the specific tools that were used by the schools. This was coming from the study itself. So these are some of the tools that are being used. The first one would be learning management system. And funny, not a lot of schools are using it, but most of the schools that we were able to gather information with is that they're using a couple of LMS. That's, for example, Moodle, Google Classroom, and so on and so forth. Next one, video conferencing. And well, we are already familiar with Google Meet, with Zoom, with Microsoft Teams, and Jitsi, and some other stuff. But one very particular thing that we discovered is that even Facebook Messenger was used for video conferencing, just to really lower as much as possible the bandwidth that is being gathered by these certain applications. Next one, communication platforms. With regards to those, Viber, WhatsApp is being utilized more than ever. Next slide, and next one. And other technology tools such as online quiz making, and so on and so forth. Next slide. And we discovered a lot of key challenges with regards to implementation of online learning during those periods. The first one would be poor to no internet connectivity at home or at location. Don has mentioned earlier that in the Philippines, there are certain students who climb up trees. I will up the ante because there are a lot, as Jenna has mentioned in the chat, there are a lot of students who are going up the mountains already just to get that particular signal in order for them to be able to send their particular outputs with regards to their requirements. Next item. It's no desktop or laptop for attending because most of the students that we encountered and some of the data that we received are mostly using smartphones, and it's really difficult to create your requirements with regards to just using a smartphone. Next item, please. Sharing in laptops or devices at home. And last item, inadequate knowledge about the digital technologies, and which really needs to be taken into consideration. Next slide. And so inadequate knowledge about methods for conducting online classes. This is a different thing. It's not really more on the student now, but more on the teacher side. Okay, next slide. So these are some non-related to technology problems in terms of the students. Can we just go on with all of the things that are there? Okay, thank you. One particular thing that I would like to emphasize here is more on how depression would be part of a student with regards to them being able to conduct online classes, because it's not really that student will just attend, and there are certain tendencies that the student will feel depressed if they would not be able to submit a particular requirement. For example, oops, I timed myself. But with regards to that one, that is one thing that needs to be emphasized. How would we be able to manage depression with regards to the students? Next slide, please. Can we also go into all of the items there? For the teachers, on the other hand, there are two items. First, for them to be able to be trained to properly administer an online class. And another one, time management, because a lot of the teachers are used to providing or maybe instructing the content in a way that they are using a face-to-face type of class, even though it's an online mode type. So it's mostly on how are you going to put it in an asynchronous or an hybrid type of environment. Next slide, please. So learning the new normal. So what are those possible solutions that can be implemented with regards to that? First slide, please. Next slide, sorry. So teaching methods and modules need to be redesigned. And can we go on with all of the items there? First and foremost, we need to always look at the content-wise on how we are going to transfer the one that we are doing to face-to-face going towards an online type of environment. And also the selection of the proper tools that needs to be used in order for you to be able to deliver the content properly. Also, the pacing of the lessons, because the students might get overloaded in a way. So if they can get overloaded with a lot of things, with a lot of requirements, I think there should be somewhat like adjustment, or maybe integration of some of each. Okay, so next slide, please. Implication to technology requirements. So can we go on already? Okay, so as much as possible, we really need to find solutions, and digital literacy and digital training needs to be implemented. Well, digital inclusion is already there, but there is
You seem to have lost Aris, or did I lose myself?
I think,
You
yeah,
hear?
his internet connection problem for him.
Oh, okay. So we'll come back to Aris, but I was hoping to what Aris was talking about is really going towards the future, and that's why, you know, as he was wrapping up, and that's really the one big question that I'd like to, you know, pose to the speakers, and also those of you in the room, please feel free to type in the chat, but also put up your hand at any time. Would like to share, you know, if you would like to share some of your experience and your thoughts or questions to the panelists. But one main question I have is, what do you think is the education gonna look like into the future, or research gonna look like in the future after we come out of COVID? Because we've learned all these things. Do you see us going back to same old, and, you know, just classroom regular, and without any of the IT, and we'll just forget all about this? Or do you see a future that's something in between that enhances the learning experience that is possible for the future? Anyone? Albert or
yeah,
go.
yeah. I think it depends on the government or even to the school management. Yeah. In fact, there's a very good chance for the whole school to promote the use of IT in education. But if the management do not get into this chance, when everything resume normal, then the chance will be missed. Okay, so as what my presentation is, in fact, we can see during the COVID-19 class suspension period, most of the school only teach half days, but they can still do the teaching. As I know, someone is talking about celebrating the 100 days of class suspension. Okay, for Hong Kong. Okay, so for this 100 days, we already doing the what we call the half day, or even do several hours of teaching. Then why we still need to teach for whole days when we go back to school? Can we, what we call the give back the times, give back the childhood to the students? That's what we are thinking about. But it depends on whether the management will looking in depth into the problem. Yeah, by sharing. Thank you.
That's a very good point. I mean, I guess from Don, what's your view in terms of, because you also look at policy side. What are the opportunities here? You know, this is a really a once in a lifetime, hopefully, opportunity. We have been looking at IT for education and remote learning for so many years, talking about it, but this is now a real opportunity to make it happen.
Right. In fact, in these, you know, we look at issues like this, like what happened in COVID-19, as a good policy window. So it's a way for us to engage policymakers to make sure that the changes that we want to be implemented will start now. And COVID-19 is accelerating digitization in terms of uptake of using technology in education. But there are things that I think would be hard to replicate in an online world. Speaking about what we do in research, for example, in the natural science, so some people have been talking about this, like when they go to their field, when they do their field work, for example, they visit bats in a remote island in Galapagos, and these field work happen once a year. There's no way that, you know, you can do that without visiting the island itself. So there are these kinds of strategies that happened before that will not be replaced by technology moving forward. But there are things that are ripe for efficiency improvements. In fact, the way that learning is being done at the moment, recording sessions and students being able to refresh and look back into the recordings, I think that's a good practice that would be useful for learners moving forward, especially for students who may have some difficulty catching up lessons um, that were discussed, but they weren't able to pick up during the discussion. So, and there are also some benefits in doing online interaction. So people were saying that in fact, some students are more interactive when, especially the younger generation, the Gen Z, maybe it's the generation thing that they feel more comfortable engaging with the teachers and with their fellow students through chats rather than Facebook. And maybe that's a good thing because that's a way for them to be engaged. That's how they converse. In that's how they talk to one another. They're more used to that, and perhaps bringing that same kind of feel into the education would be useful for them. Yeah, so I guess mix and what I'm saying is that it's a there are things that we can do. And there are also things that cannot be replicated by technology, such as doing the hard data gathering, for example.
Thank you, Don. And I see that Aris has rejoined us. You just demonstrated how a student might feel when he's just trying to hand in the homework and, in the just before the deadline and then got dropped. I see you, Felicia, your hand up, but I'll come to Aris first, whether you want to wrap up what you were just saying. What we were talking about actually while you were away is what the future looks like. And I think you were going that direction as well. What could we learn from here? And would we just go back to the same old, or do we see a future that can be more integrated with remote learning and face-to-face learning? So Aris, and then I'll go to Felicia.
Okay. Thank you, Edmon. I think the future of online learning will be more of an hybrid mode. Uh, Actually, a lot of schools are right now in the Philippines are planning on going back and opening their doors for students to come back and do face-to-face learning. But there are certain policies that needs to be followed, safety measures that needs to be implemented. So what's happening right now is that there might be an instance that maybe 50, just like Albert was mentioning earlier, there might be some instance that 50% of the students will be in the classroom, actual in the classroom, but 50% are doing it online. And there might be an instances that they are going to schedule it those 50% who are in the classroom, the other day they would be the ones who would be online and vice versa. So I think that is one thing that we're going into, as long as there's already a proper uh, and stable internet connection for all. Because if we're going to do that most often than not on the hybrid mode, there should be a stable connection so that the people who are in their respective homes, or students who are in their respective homes listening to synchronous classes for that matter, should be able to cope or to catch up with some of the lessons that are being delivered during the face-to-face classes. So I think that's the direction that we're going into. Thank you, Edmund.
That's a great observation. In fact, the other day that I was, my kid was finally going back to physical school. I was like, "You don't have a runny nose, do you?" I mean, like in the past, when a kid has a runny nose, you would still send them to school, right? I mean, but now you can't do that because it's, but then he will completely miss out of school. How do we manage that with hybrid situation would be really interesting. Felicia, you can unmute yourself as well.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So good afternoon from Indonesia. My name is Felicia. I'm originally from Indonesia. So I noticed that most speakers are concerned about people living in a remote area where they cannot access internet connection. But I want to give you an illustration what if I live in a certain countries where online platforms are restricted or prohibited by the laws and regulations. So how do we uphold fair treatment toward those living in that country, where I guess the governments are not bound by the principles we embrace in this digital era. So maybe I would like to address these questions to anyone who wants to answer. So yeah, maybe that's my questions. Thank you.
Aris, I see you have your hand up. Go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah, I'll just answer Felicia's question. So I think that's one of the things that why the country right now have decided to implement a module type of learning. It's mostly asynchronous for that matter, but it's not really online, but really offline. uh, Teachers prepare modules for those modules, actual modules, hard copy modules, which these modules would be delivered directly to the doorstep of the students. And that is a module that is for example, a 1 week or a 2 week coverage of lessons. So that's a very crude way of doing it, but just to be able to integrate this particular students who are having problems connecting online. So I think that is one way to look at it. We're still in the infant stages, so I think that's one way and one alternative that we can look into. Thank you, Edmon. Thank you, Felicia, for your question.
No, that's certainly a big problem, and the digital divide issue. And I see it was discussed in the chat as well. Any others who want to add to this? Albert, I saw you added something. Rilla, please.
Maybe for me, like from technical side, it's the first is depend on the region itself, but the second is even if we cannot access like the global network, we can set up the local network. So especially like we can see that it's more like we have to upload the online learning system itself to the local network. If the problem is we cannot access the internet, like global internet, so maybe that's the alternatives from the technical side. Thank you.
Thank you, Rilla. Oh, Don, please. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just quickly, what echoing what Aris mentioned. So in the Philippines, what they're doing is for students who don't have access to the internet, they have an option of bringing in some physical modules. So in fact, the future may not be online for these people, but it's more or less outsourcing the teaching to the parents. So that would have some different issues in themselves, but maybe that's also one way for us to think about what the future will be. Perhaps it may not be online it may not be an online solution that would be appropriate for all settings. And if the idea is to leave no one behind, we should be open to these different types of approach, whether using technology, which is great, but in instances where technology may not be appropriate, then adopting these kinds of offline crude methods might be appropriate for that particular setting too.
Oh, but I see that you added some earlier in the chat about what Hong Kong is doing. I wonder if you want to bring it in voice as well.
Okay. I think the situation right now for Hong Kong is much better because the number of cases found that for every day seems decreased a lot. But all the evidence show that the COVID-19 will be coming again. So I think we need to take a good chance to, no matter we teach or prepare for the futures. Okay, once the COVID-19 is coming again, no matter where it is, okay, we should be able to solve all the problems that now we are facing, because the cases, the class suspension before is so sudden, so that we have digital gap or the learning gap, but we need to, we should have the responsibility to prevent it to be happen again.
Thank you. Seeing no hands up and no question, if I've missed any question from the chat, please alert me to it. I'll go back to the because we're running out of time as well, and I'll go back to the speakers and kind of ask one question. Is we know that COVID is going to come back, but let's say we get over it, which eventually we will with the vaccine and everything. We should be able to go over it. So what is the ideal learning experience into the future? If you can have anything you want, just say one or two sentence. I'd see a hand up, but just one or two sentence on that. I'll go to the hand and we'll wrap there. Anyone thoughts? What's your ideal world for education, combining IT and the classroom learning? Don?
I'll just be very quick. But it should embrace. I know this is very generic, but it should embrace the specifics of inclusivity and accessibility. So as long as education using technology embraces principles of accessibility, technology-wise, and all these things, and inclusivity, I think we should be moving in the right direction.
Anyone else? Aris?
Yeah, for me, people should be adaptive as much as possible. And adaptation would really bring about a lot of changes. And we all know that it's already been changing, but adaptability is really a key for us to be able to go on with this. And not only that, maybe you need to be open-minded of all of the things that have been have been happening around, because being open-minded really is, I think it would spark something for these people to really have an idea in order for us to be able to have this implementation and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think adaptability and open-mindedness.
Thank you, Aris. I see two hands up. I will go to them quickly and then give it to Albert and Rilla to wrap. Swaran?
Hi, I just wanted to share something. So I teach at Fiji National University, and we mostly engaged into training of ICT related courses. That's my department in particular. And there is one course in particular that we teach, Diploma in IT, which specializes in network engineering. So the first semester is already a challenge, and I think it's really no news that inclusion in STEM subjects is already a challenge, especially in developing and underdeveloped countries. Now, an experience that we had is when COVID-19 hit us. Now, for a small island country, it was a very big issue for us, right? But we had some students who went back to the islands. Now, you may know that Fiji is comprises of more than 300 islands, and some of them are in remote places. So some of our students went back to their villages, and as it is, they had accessibility issues in their remote islands wherever they were based. So some of them came back. We tried to use
ask you to keep it short because we have only 2 minutes left.
Okay. So what we did was we used all different types of mechanisms, including a YouTube channel, but simulation software didn't really work well for us. So we needed to have one extra month where we just taught our students the practical items again. Is there anyone who can share the experiences in teaching STEM subjects in particular? Because TV subjects, I believe they're a little easier to teach when you have internet access. But STEM subjects is a real big issue. Is there anyone who could shed some light on that?
I'll come to the speakers, but I'll go to Binod first. That's very interesting because my kids get a kit sent to them every couple of weeks. But Binod.
I won't take it long. Binod Bosnet here from Nepal. So my concluding remark would be for future education, technology accommodating personalized learning needs of every student would be the way forward for the future, I think. Thank you.
That would be a great way to end our session, but I will see if anyone wanted to respond further to the STEM, especially, I guess, maybe Albert, you might have some thoughts on what, how teachers deal with STEM and when you talk about remote learning.
Okay, I do the response to the STEM and also I do the wrap up for myself. Okay, I think for Hong Kong, for teaching the STEM, what we can do is we just like Edmon said, we courier the STEM kids to the kids at home so that they can have practically, they have the things to do. But even though it also depends on the internet for the tutor to guide them. Otherwise, simply send the kids, send the things to the kids is of no use. And so for my wrap up is exactly the same. For Hong Kong, we are lucky that we can have good accessibility, devices, etc. But what we cannot solve right now is about how to teach the practical lessons. For example, physics, chemistry, biology, and even those STEM subjects. Up to now, we can't find any good solution. And so we are highly expecting some business partner to develop solutions for them. And I think that is a good chances for business to do their work.
Thank you, Albert. Any last words, Rilla?
Yeah, for me, maybe just the main point of ICT is to make an easier life, right? But we also have to understand the equity. So better to know and listen what students and institution needs. For example, like the medical students and elementary students have a different treatment. Like elementary student, maybe we have to gamification the learning system, but for medical students, it's different. So the equity is the best thing, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Rilla. And I'll wrap with this and hope I challenge everyone here that in 2 to 3 years, let's try to have this session again. And I hope we won't go back to the same old. But I am not totally optimistic. But I think everyone needs to contribute to keep this momentum, and I think IT can be the level the playing field for more students than less. Although there are of course all those issues. Thank you everyone. I overran for a little bit, but thank you everyone for joining, and see you. Bye.